Greystone Penitentiary sat like a scar on the edge of the desert, isolated, wind-battered, and forgotten by most. The kind of place where time didn't move forward, it circled back on itself, dragging secrets with it. Officer Miriam Lane had worked there for 12 years. She'd seen riots quelled, escape attempts foiled, and men broken by silence more than by bars. But nothing unsettled her like Cell 9C, the oldest block in the North Wing, now reserved for low-risk inmates. When the call came through the radio that morning, inmate down in 9C, Miriam didn't rush. Accidents happened, especially among aging prisoners. The warden's voice was calm when she arrived, slip and fall. Already ruled. But something about his tone didn't sit right. The body had already been removed. The floor mopped. Sanitized. Too clean. Miriam glanced at the cell wall, and froze. There, etched into the paint with something sharp, was a single word, help. Miriam leaned in, heart thudding. The word, help, wasn't scratched with a fingernail, it was carved deep, precise, like it had been done over hours, maybe days. But according to records, the inmate, Harold Finch, 64, had only been in 9C for 18 hours. He was transferred late the night before, supposedly for observation. Miriam checked the logbook. No officer had signed the intake. No nurse had logged vitals. No video feed from the hallway, system malfunction, again. She walked the cell perimeter slowly, her eyes adjusting to the dim light. That's when she saw it, a torn piece of bedsheet stuffed behind the radiator. She pulled it free. Written in shaky, uneven handwriting were 5 words, he wasn't supposed to talk. A chill raced down her spine. Harold Finch wasn't just another convict. He had known something. And someone in this prison wanted that something buried. Alongside him, Miriam tucked the note into her sleeve and stepped out of the cell, masking her breath. The hallway was empty, too quiet for mid-morning rounds. She passed the surveillance room and peeked inside. Officer Jensen sat there, earbuds in, eyes glazed over a paused screen. Paused. Miriam's jaw tightened. She slipped in, rewound the hallway footage manually, bypassing the system's flagged malfunction zone. For a split second, frame 12:44 a.m., she caught it, 3 men in black entering 9C. No uniforms. No IDs. One carried a small black case. A few frames later, they were gone. No sign of Harold. No return footage. Just, gone. Miriam stared at the screen, then printed the frame, hiding it beneath her vest. When she turned to leave, Jensen finally looked up. "Everything okay, Lane?" he asked too smoothly. She forced a nod. But something told her, Harold Finch's death wasn't the first, just the first to leave a message. That night, Miriam couldn't sleep. The faces from the grainy footage haunted her, unidentified, precise, like ghosts in uniform. She replayed Harold Finch's name in her head. He'd been convicted of wire fraud, not violence. Quiet, compliant, scheduled for parole review in 2 months. So why was he sent to 9C, a wing usually reserved for overflow or troublemakers? And why had no one questioned a death so conveniently timed? The next morning, Miriam requested Finch's transfer papers from admin. They were missing. Must have been a clerical error, the clerk mumbled, avoiding eye contact. But something else struck her. Harold had no listed family. No one to demand answers. No one to file complaints. It was the perfect erasure. Miriam stood in the records room, surrounded by decades of dust and silence, and felt the weight of it all. This wasn't a slip and fall. This was a system that knew how to disappear people. Determined to dig deeper, Miriam visited the prison's archives, an old, padlocked room few staff even remembered existed. She found Harold Finch's intake file buried under a pile marked closed, no investigation needed. Inside, a single sheet stood out, handwritten and signed, with 5 inmate names scribbled in the margins. 4 of them were deceased. All ruled accidental. The 5th? Cell 12B. Still active. Her pulse quickened. She made her way to 12B during lunch shift when most staff were distracted. Inside sat a frail man with a nervous twitch and eyes that didn't blink enough. His nameplate read, A. Riley. She introduced herself softly. The man didn't move, just whispered, "They think Harold told me." "I didn't ask to know." Miriam crouched beside him. "Know what?" He looked up, eyes wide. "This prison has a second basement. It's not on any map. That's where they take the ones who remember too much." Miriam froze. A second basement? She'd worked at Greystone for over a decade, she knew every floor plan, every maintenance tunnel. Or so she thought. Riley's hands trembled as he reached under his cot, sliding out a thin piece of cardboard wrapped in plastic. Inside was a crudely sketched map, hand-drawn on the back of a meal inventory sheet. There, beneath the north wing, was a corridor marked, Access, Boiler Room, East Panel. Riley's voice dropped lower. "They take men down there, and when they come back, if they come back, they're not the same." Harold said he heard names. Government ones. Miriam swallowed hard, eyes locked on the map. This was beyond policy breaches. This was conspiracy. She stood to leave, but Riley grabbed her wrist. "If you go looking, be ready to disappear too." Miriam looked him in the eye. "Then I'll make sure someone notices when I do." That evening, Miriam returned to the north wing under the pretense of checking boiler pressure. She wore her old maintenance badge, long expired but still convincing under poor lighting. The east panel looked like any other, rusted, dented, ignored. But when she pressed her palm flat against the seam, she felt it, airflow. A door pretending not to be a door. She pried it open with a crowbar, heart pounding, and stepped into darkness. The corridor beyond wasn't on any blueprint. Bare bulbs buzzed above like dying stars, and the concrete walls bled moisture. Every step echoed like it didn't belong. As she moved deeper, she passed old equipment, crates with military tags, and a sealed door marked only with a symbol, no words, just a red triangle. She reached for the handle. But before she could turn it, a voice echoed from behind, "You shouldn't be here, Officer Lane." Miriam spun around, flashlight beam slicing through the dust. A man stood at the end of the corridor, broad frame, pressed uniform, but no name tag. His voice was calm, almost rehearsed. "You've accessed a restricted maintenance tunnel. Turn around." Miriam straightened. "I'm responding to an equipment alert," she lied. The man didn't blink. "There are no active alerts." He stepped closer, boots silent on concrete. "Officer Lane, we've been monitoring your movements since yesterday." Her heart clenched, but her voice stayed even. "Then you know Harold Finch didn't fall." A beat of silence. Then the man sighed, as if disappointed. He wasn't supposed to be moved to 9C. Someone rushed the timeline. Miriam's fingers tightened around her flashlight. "What timeline?" The man ignored the question, tapping his earpiece. "Containment breach, lower hull. Target located." Lights above flickered. From the far end of the corridor, heavy doors began to unlock. Miriam didn't wait. She bolted toward the red triangle door, slamming her shoulder into it just as the heavy doors behind her began to creak open. Alarms hadn't sounded, whatever this was, it wasn't part of Greystone's official system. The lock gave way, and she slipped inside, slamming it shut behind her. The room was dimly lit, sterile. Computers lined the walls. But what stole her breath were the cells, glass-walled, silent, each containing a single figure. Men. Awake, but unmoving. Blank stares. Heartbeats visible on monitors. As if alive, but paused. One of them, Harold Finch. His eyes met hers. He blinked. Just once. Then a faint smile. "I knew someone would listen," he mouthed. Behind her, the door handle jiggled. A voice called, louder now. "Open the door, Lane. You have no idea what you're walking into." Miriam stared at Harold. She did now. And she wasn't walking out empty-handed. Miriam scanned the room, searching for any kind of control panel. Near the center stood a console with biometric access, far beyond her clearance. But beneath it, she spotted something simpler, a manual override switch behind a locked cage. She grabbed a nearby metal stool, smashing the padlock with controlled fury. The glass vibrated as the men behind her stirred, slow, disconnected, like waking from years underwater. Harold's eyes stayed locked on hers, calm amidst the chaos. She flipped the switch. Lights dimmed. A siren wailed softly, internal, not loud enough to alert the upper blocks. Each glass door hissed open with a pneumatic sigh. One by one, the men stepped forward, disoriented but moving. "You're free," she whispered. Harold nodded once. "Not yet. But we will be." Behind them, footsteps pounded down the hallway. Miriam turned to Harold. "You know the way out?" He answered with a grim smile. "Better, I know who put us in." Harold led her through a side corridor hidden behind a rolling rack of server units. "This wing was decommissioned 20 years ago," he murmured. "But someone revived it, for testing." Miriam kept close as they moved past sealed rooms marked only by numbers and barcodes. "Testing what?" she asked. Harold hesitated. "Memory manipulation. Behavioral override. They called it Project Quiet Mind. Most of us volunteered, or thought we did." He stopped before a locked steel door. "Beyond this is the archive. Everything they've done, records, footage, protocols, it's all in there." Miriam's blood ran cold. "Why you? Why now?" Harold's jaw tightened. "Because I started remembering. Names. Files. The people funding this weren't just government. There were corporations. Private security firms. Even someone from the Bureau." A loud clang echoed behind them. The glass cells were no longer empty. The guards had discovered the breach. "If we don't get that evidence out," Harold said, "they'll erase us all, again." Miriam and Harold burst into the archive room just as the emergency doors began sealing behind them. The space was colder, lined with rows of locked cabinets, terminals blinking softly in standby. Harold moved with eerie precision, bypassing biometric locks with a sequence he seemed to remember by instinct. "They trained us to forget," he said, typing rapidly, "but not all of it sticks." On screen, classified folders began to open, names of inmates falsely registered, shadow transfers, injections labeled Cognitive Dampener, Series 4. Miriam grabbed a flash drive from her belt and began downloading. Outside, muffled voices shouted. Boots thundered closer. Then, from a hidden speaker overhead, "Officer Lane. This is Warden Keller. Stop now. We'll bury this like we buried them." Miriam's jaw clenched. She looked at Harold. "How far does this go?" He didn't blink. "Greystone is just one. There are others. And they'll silence us all, unless we speak first." The flash drive hit 89% when the lights flickered, then went red. A computerized voice echoed, "Containment breach. Lockdown in 60 seconds." Miriam moved fast, grabbing printed files while Harold yanked a panel off the far wall, revealing a narrow ventilation shaft. "We crawl," he said. "There's an exit behind the generator room." The pounding on the archive door intensified. Miriam slipped the drive into her vest and followed him into the crawlspace, dragging a duffel of files behind her. The metal walls shook with each blow. "They'll come after us," she whispered. Harold's reply was calm. "They already have." For 10 minutes they moved in silence, heat rising, breath shallow. As they neared the exit, Miriam saw it, daylight bleeding through cracked concrete. They were close. But just before reaching it, Harold paused. "There's something I didn't tell you," he said. "I wasn't the only one they failed to erase." Miriam stared at Harold, confusion tightening in her chest. "What do you mean?" He exhaled. "There's another survivor. Not an inmate, a staff member. She worked in medical, oversaw the dosing protocols. But she went off script. Started documenting side effects, patterns." He pulled a crumpled photo from his pocket. A woman in scrubs, smiling faintly, with eyes that seemed haunted. "Name's Dr. Evelyn Sharp. Vanished 5 years ago. They said she quit. But I think she escaped." Miriam took the photo, her pulse quickening. "Where is she now?" Harold shrugged. "Last I heard, off-grid, somewhere in New Mexico. She knows more than I ever did." Behind them, a siren blared. The crawlspace was no longer safe. Miriam shoved the photo into her vest. "Then we find her." As they crawled toward the faint sunlight, dust coating their skin, neither of them realized, someone was already waiting on the other side of the wall. As Miriam pushed the grate aside and emerged into the blinding desert sun, a figure stepped forward, silhouetted by the light. Tall, broad-shouldered, face hidden behind tactical sunglasses. Not prison staff. Not police. He raised his hands slowly. "You don't need to run," he said, voice low and even. "We're not with Greystone." Harold climbed out beside her, shielding his eyes. "Then who are you?" The man reached into his jacket, not for a weapon, but for a badge. It wasn't government-issued. It was blank. "We've been tracking this program for years," the man said. "Dr. Sharp's disappearance wasn't voluntary. We got her out." Miriam stiffened. "Why now? Why show up today?" The man nodded toward her vest. "Because you just pulled the last thread holding this quiet. And what comes next won't be quiet for long." Behind him, 2 black SUVs waited, doors open. "If you want the truth," he said, "get in." Miriam slid into the back seat of the SUV, Harold beside her, silent but alert. The windows were tinted nearly black, the cabin soundproofed. The man in the front passenger seat turned slightly. "We call ourselves Echo Division. Unofficial. Unfunded. Unwanted." He handed Miriam a folder labeled Project Quiet Mind, External Witness Protocol. Inside were photos, heavily redacted reports, and surveillance stills, including one of Miriam herself leaving Cell 9C. "They know you're out," he said. "You've got less than 24 hours before they bury this, again." Harold leaned forward. "What about Dr. Sharp?" The man nodded. "She's alive. In hiding. But only barely. They've already tried once." He slid a burner phone into Miriam's hand. "You'll contact her. She trusts no one else." Miriam opened the folder again. At the bottom was a photo of another facility, one that looked just like Greystone. Only this time, the nameplate read, Pinebridge Medical Center. The burner phone vibrated only once before a voice answered, dry, wary, precise. "Who gave you this number?" Miriam hesitated. "Harold Finch. He said you'd know." A pause. Then, "Meet me at mile marker 47. Come alone. No vehicles past the gate." The line went dead. Echo Division arranged a drop-off 2 miles out. Miriam hiked the desert trail at dusk, wind sharp against her face, the map etched in her memory. She found the gate, rusted, overgrown with thornbrush, and slipped through. A single light flickered in the distance, half buried in sand. It was an old bunker entrance. Inside, the air was stale, metallic. Then a door creaked. Dr. Evelyn Sharp stood there, older, thinner, but unmistakably sharp-eyed. "If you came for justice," she said, "you're already too late. But if you came for truth, there's a lot more buried than bodies." Miriam stepped inside. "Then let's start digging." Inside the bunker, walls were lined with weathered file boxes and humming hard drives powered by a sputtering generator. Dr. Sharp moved efficiently, pulling open a drawer labeled Series 4, Cognitive Trials. "They told us we were developing trauma treatment, neural resets for PTSD victims. What they didn't say," she paused, holding up a photo of Harold in a hospital gown, "was that we'd be testing on inmates, people no one would miss." She slid a stack of files toward Miriam. Medical records. Consent forms signed under sedation. Notes in red ink, subject recalls unauthorized memories, initiate wipe. Miriam's stomach turned. "And you leaked this?" Sharp shook her head. "I tried. They silenced 2 researchers. Faked suicides." Her voice dropped. "I ran before I was next." She opened one final folder. It wasn't about Harold. It was about Miriam, her name, employment history, and a line that read, Phase 5, Observational Subject Placement. Miriam stared at the folder, heart pounding. Her photo was stapled to the top, taken years ago, candid, not from any staff file she'd seen. "What is this?" she whispered. Dr. Sharp didn't look away. "You were placed at Greystone 5 months after Phase 4 collapsed. You didn't apply. Your resume was built. Your references? Ghosts." Miriam's throat tightened. "You're saying I'm part of this?" Sharp's voice was calm. "You were monitored, not complicit. They wanted to see what happened if one morally intact officer witnessed the system unravel." Miriam sank into a chair, hands trembling. "All this time, I thought I was uncovering something." Sharp nodded. "You were. But they were watching what you'd do once you did." Miriam's mind raced, memories, assignments, odd coincidences, all forming a trail she hadn't realized she was walking. "So what now?" she asked. Sharp turned toward a terminal. "Now, we rewrite their ending before they write ours." Dr. Sharp pulled up a digital interface, an encrypted network of files, codenames, and secure channels. "This is the core of their operation," she said. "Facilities like Greystone are just masks. The real infrastructure runs through a shell network called Virex, funded by private defense contractors, buried beneath health research grants." Miriam leaned in, scanning names: Pinebridge, Marlowe Institute, Crestfall Holdings. "How many are there?" she asked. Sharp exhaled. 12 that we know of. Maybe more." Miriam's jaw clenched. "And they're still active?" Sharp nodded. "Unless we expose them, publicly, undeniably, they'll just shift locations, bury it deeper." Miriam slid the flash drive into the terminal. "What if we stream it live? Not to one news outlet, to all of them. Simultaneously." Sharp raised an eyebrow. "Risky. They'll come hard. Fast." Miriam stared at her own name still glowing on the screen. "Then let them. For once, we'll be the ones watching." They worked through the night, linking Dr. Sharp's archive with Miriam's flash drive, patching into satellite feeds and dormant media servers once used for emergency broadcasts. "Once we hit transmit," Sharp warned, "there's no undo. They'll trace it fast." Miriam nodded. "But the story will already be out." At sunrise, they initiated the upload, targeting not just newsrooms, but open-source forums, whistleblower channels, even secure military inboxes. Footage of sedated inmates, falsified death reports, interviews with surviving families, all stitched together in a seamless stream of truth. The screen flashed, dissemination in progress, 17%. Outside, the sound of tires skidding on gravel. Sharp's breath caught. They're early. Miriam rose, steady. Then we hold them off. Long enough for the truth to finish what we started. She grabbed the transmitter's power core and slipped it into her coat. Even if they take us, she said calmly, they won't take the message. The first shots rang out as the upload hit 52%. Dust shook from the bunker ceiling. Dr. Sharp pulled Miriam behind a row of servers, shielding the terminal. We don't need to win the fight, she whispered, we just need to win the moment. Through the static of gunfire, Miriam's thoughts turned inward, not to herself, but to Harold, Riley, the faces in glass cells. Forgotten people. Quiet stories never told. This was emotional storytelling at its rawest, not crafted for attention, but born of necessity. Truth, not for profit, but for healing. For dignity. A final blast rocked the bunker as the power flickered, but the signal held. Miriam clutched the transmitter tight against her chest. If we go down, she said through gritted teeth, let it be for something no one can bury again. And in that instant, with courage louder than fear, they held the line, for everyone still unheard. The upload hit 100% just as the bunker doors blew open. Armed figures stormed in, but too late. The signal had already split across countless mirrors, copied into cloud vaults, emailed to investigative journalists, downloaded by civilian watchdogs. Somewhere, in a quiet newsroom in Chicago, a young intern opened the footage, stunned. In New York, a veteran journalist gasped aloud. In Sacramento, a grieving mother dropped her coffee as her son's name flashed across the screen, his accidental death now exposed. Across the country, truth spread like wildfire, impossible to erase. Back in the bunker, Miriam stood bloodied but unbowed. A soldier approached her with zip ties, but hesitated. Was it real? He whispered. She looked him in the eye. Every second of it. And in that moment, one man lowered his weapon, not in surrender, but in solidarity. Because the power of a story isn't just in its telling, it's in who chooses to believe it. Weeks later, Miriam sat in a federal hearing room, not as a defendant, but as a witness. The footage had triggered multiple investigations, arrests, and the quiet dismantling of Greystone and its sister facilities. Survivors were released. Families reunited. Memorials erected where names had once been erased. As the committee asked their final questions, one senator leaned forward. Why did you risk everything? Miriam looked up, eyes steady. Because silence serves no one. And some stories don't ask to be told, they demand it. Outside the courthouse, a small crowd waited, not for protest, but for thanks. A boy handed her a letter. It read, "My father was one of them. Now I know the truth." If this story moved you, don't scroll past. Share it. Speak it. Stand for those still trapped in the dark. Because sometimes, the most powerful revolution begins not with violence, but with a voice that refuses to disappear.